Now this video isn't exactly original, it's been done, I'm sure, plenty of times on BookTube. But on Shazza's channel a few weeks ago, she made a video in which she reviewed her predictions for some 5-star books that she had made, I think, the previous year, and then she was just kind of rounding it up to see whether her predictions of the 5 stars were right or wrong. And I've definitely watched a few of these videos before elsewhere, and I don't know, never have they kind of captured my attention like Shazza's one. So she inspired me to do this video, to do my own predictions for some 5-star reads that I think I'm gonna love. And then to have this video here, to then look back when I finally read all these books, which could be anywhere, and then deciding whether or not they were a 5-star read and why, etc, etc, all of that sort of stuff. I've also ranked these books. I've got 5 books here, so I've also ranked them from, I think, the least likely to be a 5-star read and then the most likely to be 5-star reads, because I don't know, I found it really hard. I think I doubted every single decision I could have ever made in my book buying life to think, is this book going to be a 5-star read? And there are some books which I definitely hope to be 5-star reads, but I don't want to put any pressure on them to be. So I think these ones that I've chosen, and you'll see the reasons I chose them to be perhaps a 5-star read, are all kind of based on experience previously, which could lead me to believe why these ones might be. So let's just kind of get going and begin, I guess. So the least likely to be a 5-star read, and probably the biggest curveball on this list, is actually going to be Daughters of Chivalry, The Forgotten Children of Edward I by Kelcey Wilson Lee. Now this is a non-fiction book, which I don't think I have read a 5-star non-fiction book for a very long time. The reason I chose this one as a possible 5-star read is because, first of all, when I did Non-Fiction November, when I read The Map of Knowledge by Violet Muller, that wasn't a 5-star read, but I did really enjoy that, and I think for the reasons that I enjoyed that are the sort of similar reasons that I might enjoy this. First of all, it's written by a woman, and I think one of the things I found in November was that I wanted to read more non-fiction from women, just because I felt that they carried less sort of cultural signifiers within their writing, which made them seem like they were better than others, which you see a lot, alright? I have noticed that happens a lot in men's non-fiction writing, which I think is perhaps based on a rich history of men in writing. So there's that, but also this book is a sort of non-fiction account of the daughters of Edward I. These are 4 medieval princesses, and from the back of this, it talks about how, we have this idea of what a medieval princess should have been like, predominantly based around sort of literature on the romances and all of this, they are there ultimately to just produce children for the throne and everything, and I think it kind of not only plays into this to see how this actually did shape the daughters' lives, but also debunks the sort of notions that we do have and looks at these women as sort of vessels of their own who can do their own stuff, and actually challenged the preconceptions not only of their time but of our time about their time. So that kind of seems really interesting. This is a proof copy, so it's out on the 21st of March, and on the back it sort of gives you this is the sort of book that you can recommend to people who like this, and this. And it's really interesting because on the back, not only do they give you other famous historical female writers, they also give you some historical fiction writers, so fans of those historical fictions would also like this. And I think that's something that caught my attention, is that it sort of spans the edges of fiction and non-fiction. Of course it is all going to be true, there is basically a biography historical account of these women's lives, but I think it's going to be written in a way that makes it easily accessible to people who do enjoy reading fiction more, and to be able to capture that feeling that you get when reading an historical fiction book, which I've been kind of really in the mood for recently. I seldom read historical fiction, but recently I've kind of been fancying it, and I've got a few titles that I want to pick up because of that. So then, up from that, the second least likely to get 5 stars is The Troublesome Offspring of Cardinal Guzman. Now, this book by Louis de Bernières I picked up because it's the third book in the Latin American trilogy that de Bernières wrote, and I've read the first book, which is called The War of Don Manuel's Netherpart. I enjoyed that book. I only give it a 4 stars though. The trilogy as a whole is, I guess, like an homage to not only Latin America, but the Latin American magical realist sort of literature that came around and inspired Bernières like very much. Not only in his writing, but in his like experience and outlook on life. And his experience of time being in Latin America helped him to kind of like look at different facets of the literary canon of Latin American history, but also the sort of political history, and then kind of create this world in which we're looking at a completely fictionalized Latin American country, which is very much situated in a real Latin America, and then kind of the histories of all the various countries around impact the sort of history of the country that we get in this trilogy. And the reason I chose this one in particular is because in the first one, whilst I did enjoy it, it did take me a while to like kind of get into it, and I was a bit like not really sure what it was about. And then the second one I haven't read yet, but the topic of that one is probably the one that I'm like least interested in, whereas this one is the one that I actually picked up first before realising it was a trilogy, and I'm quite excited for, just because of the play on the religious aspects of it, and this one kind of looks at sex and carnal pleasure and things within the context of the Latin American sort of corruption and religious cleansing, which kind of fascinates me. And I think, given the style that the first one was written and the humour that went in that, could really make this one a 5-star read, more so than the other two. But also because it is the final one, and I think it's going to wrap up the history of this fictional country quite nicely. So then the next 3 books are definitely the most potential to be 5 stars, and these are the ones I kind of feel the most confident about. So the one that I feel the least confident about within the most confident zone is Against Nature by Joris-Karl Huysmans. Now this is a translation by Theo Cuffe. I'm interested in this one because on the back it says this is the book that Oscar Wilde loved and that Dorian Gray loved, and that kind of basically inspired Dorian Gray. It is basically a story of kind of a nobleman who lives such a decadent lifestyle, and he looks at like the sort of the aesthetic meaning of life and kind of lives it in to such an extreme, and then from that kind of has his hand in a sort of a very dark and gothic and sort of murderous storyline. That's what I've engaged from back. I love the sound of it. I'm not the biggest reader of classics, but The Picture of Dorian Gray is one of the classics that I do really love, and this one sounds like it could be of that same ilk, of that same style, and giving me the sort of the same feelings of what I would hope from in a classic. But also I'm interested because this is the latest translation from Riverrun Editions, and there is a Penguin Black classic from a different translator. So I'd actually be really interested into reading them both like side by side, but also because I really love the cover of the Black classic. So looking at them side by side and actually seeing the difference in translations, perhaps, because I guess they're ultimately from quite different times, is going to be really interesting, I think. But also just the general plot of this book, the dark, heady nature of the synopsis really caught my attention and could be a sign of finding more classics that I would enjoy. So then the 4th book is, of course, the second most likely to be a 5-star, and there was a part of me that didn't want to put this on my list because I was bitter. This book is called 100 Shadows by Hwang. Now this is a Korean book from Tilted Axis Press. If any of you follow me on Twitter, you might have noticed that I had some trouble receiving this book from Tilted Axis Press. I personally wanted to shop from their own shop straight rather than doing it through my bookshop, because they're a small independent press and they're a not-for-profit press, and sell themselves to be, you know, putting out the best of like under the radar translated fictions, and when we buy books into the shop, we of course get it from a wholesaler, which means that we buy it at like a discount, and then on top of that I then get a further discount for being an employee of the shop when I buy it. So then ultimately less money actually goes to the publisher themselves, as it would if I bought directly from that publisher. So a lot of times from independent presses, I will try to shop straight from the publisher. I probably won't do it again from Tilted Axis Press, just because it was a nightmare. Orders weren't going through, but my money got taken, and then books weren't being delivered, and nobody was replying to me from their offices. Eventually I got the book, and it's a bit damaged on the back, but I can deal. So I didn't want to put it on the list because of that, because I felt like my relationship with this book was going to be bad. But then I, read the synopsis again, and I was like, do you know what, actually, I think this could really be a 5-star read. Now, the premise of this book is 2 young people working in an electronic market in Seoul, and this place is definitely in contrast to like the sparkling, shining city of Seoul that I think you might think and perceive. With the demolition of the market that's about to happen, these 2 people notice that there are ghosts that are showing up within this market. Now, I chose this book because the synopsis itself has it sounds like it's going to have the sort of the whimsical, dreamlike nature of a Hiromi Kawakami novel, but also that sort of darker, edgier, and slightly magical realist nature of perhaps a David Mitchell novel. And because I've linked it to those 2 authors in my head, I'm like, yes, I will definitely love this book. The premise is a premise that definitely captures my imagination. It stirs a feeling of excitement within me, and it kind of checks off all the things that I like to read in books. So all of those kind of melded together make this seem like it's going to be quite likely a 5-star read. So fingers crossed. I might have to give it some time to get over the ordeal of getting this book, but I am excited nonetheless about it. And finally, this one is like the safest bet. I think this one is probably the most likely to be a 5-star read, and that's 3 novels by César Aira. Now, this is a collection of 3 novels. I have read César Aira's The Little Buddhist Monk before, and really enjoyed that. It was a very short novella, and Pack's Little Punch was just very weird, very wacky, but I loved it nonetheless. So I think this book, because I know the author's work, I kind of trust that I'm going to enjoy it. There isn't particularly any synopses about the books on the back. It kind of just talks about the collection as a whole, but the titles of the books, I don't know, they just excite me. So the first one is called Ghosts. The second one is An Episode in the Life of a Landscape Painter. And then the third one is The Literary Conference. And those titles, I don't know, they're good titles. They're titles that make me go, yes, I want to read those. And I think I will love those. So I think this is the safest bet just because of who it is. I have faith in his writing. I was a bit apprehensive first about putting this on the list because I didn't know whether to look at it as 3 separate novels and then maybe just choose one novel of it, or to look at it as a whole book. But since I have got it as a book, somebody has made the decision to put these books together, so there must be a reason for that, to put them in one binder. So it'll be interesting to look at them as a set of 3 as opposed to 3 separate ones. Hopefully that's the right decision. We shall see when I finally wrap up all of these books and that I have finally read them all. But I do hope to get to them soon. It's just a case of actually, going through with it, and perhaps this video is going to be that push that I need. So we shall see in the next video that I do about these books how they are rated, not only whether they were 5-star ratings or whether my sort of ranking of them is the sort of end ranking that I would do. If I ranked them in how I felt about them at the end, would it be the same as how I ranked them here in this video, if that makes sense? So anyway, that's that for today. I'll see you next time for another video. Bye bye.